Middle Path Radio, your number one online Islamic talk station.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You're listening to Middle Path Radio. I'm Kamal Hussein, and welcome back to Straight Talk. I hope you have had a wonderful Ramadan and a late Eid Mubarak from everyone here at Straight Talk. Due to Maghrib Salah, we have started a little bit late than our usual time, which is 9 p.m. So apologies if you have been waiting. So tonight in the studio we have Brother Khairul Islam, our regular contributor to this show, and Brother Nazul Hussein, who is a secondary school teacher by profession. Jazakallah khair, brothers, for coming down. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, my brother.
Yeah, fantastic, good stuff. Okay, so tonight we want to discuss the recent terror attacks in Europe, especially the Nice attack, which saw 84 people killed when a lorry plunged into the crowds. A total of 303 people were taken to hospital following this attack. Also this week, we saw another incident in Normandy, which is in France. An 86-year-old priest brutally murdered. And this was also claimed by the so-called Islamic State. So we have had so many of these terror attacks this year. We had France, Turkey, America, Germany. How do we make sense of these attacks? It's almost a daily occurrence. Every day you wonder which country would be next. Also, Islamophobic hate crimes in London and all over Europe have doubled this year. What are your thoughts? How do you feel living in Europe as a Muslim? We really want to hear from you, your thoughts and concerns, or maybe advice. Call or text 07477080248 or tweet us at Middle Path Radio. You can also listen to this show from our website, which is straight-talk.co.uk. So inshallah, please get in touch, contribute to this show, inshallah. So Brother Khairul, let me start with you. What are your reactions to the recent attacks that is unfolding?
Subhan Allah, it's been a week, more than a week of mass killing and horrific killings that's happened, where 84 people were killed in Nice, and then following that, there's been many attacks in Germany, about 3 or 4, I believe, one in Munich as well, and there's been one in Japan where 19 people were massacred by an individual.
Is this linked to?
Well, it's interesting because obviously, they'll some of them will be viewed in a certain way with a certain spin, where other of the similar attacks would be viewed with in a certain way with a certain spin. I think as we discuss this show, I'm sure I'll come up with a lot of these points, and it will be clear. And then this horrific attack that's happened just only 2 days ago in Normandy.
Yep.
Which all of us condemn. This is out of. We know Islam is totally condemns this kind of attacks. Old man, also religious, a priest. I mean, we've got a famous saying of Rasulullah sallallahu that you do not attack the priests, you do not attack the monks, you do not attack the women, you do not attack children. So it's nothing to do with Islam in that sense. Yeah. So this is what's happened, and it's playing out beyond from that, and we're still waiting to see what will happen. I mean, there's response from the Muslims in a certain way. We saw how some of the imams in France and also all over the world have responded to these attacks. And also the non-Muslims, their response to it. I think we need to discuss this.
Yeah, definitely. This is a discussion we want to have. You can please, you can call in and you can have your say. So please do ring in. Our number is 07477080248. Brother Nazul, your thoughts and reactions on these attacks.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I think my initial reactions were the same as most people, that of sadness, and that is for two reasons. One, any such attack always leads to the death of innocent people, and the attack in Nice was particularly tragic because a lot of children had died, and we know categorically from a Sharia perspective, attacking civilians, attacking children, as Khairul has said, this is all strictly haram.
A lot of Muslims also died.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of Muslims also passed away in these cases, and the acts of terror don't single out who. It's collateral. Whoever they take out, they take out.
Yeah.
And most of the time, it is bystanders and civilians who get caught in the crossfire between whatever is going on. And being parents amongst ourselves, we know it's sad for parents to lose children.
Absolutely,
It's even more sad if it's lost under these circumstances. And then my final reaction would be, what happens to the Muslims in Europe? I think something you were alluding to in your introduction. You get a further demonization of Muslims. You get a further demonization of Islam. So it's sad in both instances, the tragedy in the loss of lives, as well as the tragedy on our part as Muslims and Islams and how we view.
You're a teacher. I mean, how was it in your school? I mean,
well, considering
you deal, you work with non-Muslims, you work with Muslims. How do they react?
Fortunately, the fact that I work within a humanities department, the teachers tend to be people who are open, people who like to discuss, people who like to ask questions. And because I've built relationships with them, and I think that's the most important thing, where we as Muslims, whichever work environment we have, we need to build relationships with our non-Muslim colleagues whereby they feel comfortable enough to ask us difficult questions, and then we ourselves need
what kind of questions did they ask you? I mean, what did you get?
Questions would be things like, what do you make of the event and the incident that has taken place, whether it was France or the Bataclan that happened before that, the diners where the people were attacked in these instances, or even political issues like what's happening in the Middle East and Syria. So there's always open questions that you will get from non-Muslims. And like I said just a minute ago, you've got to have relationships with the non-Muslims where they feel comfortable, where they can ask you, and then you yourself as a Muslim have a duty to know what
was it another shock for them? I mean, are they getting used to it?
I think there's a difference between us as Muslims and how we're used to the acts of terror that happen in Muslim countries, because we know there are more Muslims who are victims of acts of terror, like the one that happened in Iraq in the run-up to Eid was particularly tragic. 200 people killed the day before Eid in Baghdad.
Subhan Allah,
and that was really tragic because people were out making preparations as we were, waiting for Ramadan and to celebrate Eid. Same way we're used to these things, I don't think they have such where they are so used to these attacks happening, which is why you see different reactions from the Muslim community as different to the non-Muslim community. But since we live within the non-Muslim community, we do have a responsibility, and that's the point that I'm trying to make. We do have a responsibility to carry the correct message and to counter the incorrect narrative that Muslims and Islam are to blame or to be afraid of. That is a duty that we all have as Muslims living wherever we are in Europe.
Just, I mean,
don't worry, you guys can come in.
The initial reaction,
just because I'm not looking at you doesn't mean you can't
one of the
come
things that you see the horrific action that's happened. You think, Subhan Allah, is another blow. I mean, innocent people are being killed. But also at the same time, you look at it and you say, these are the same actions that are going to be used by the Western governments in France and Britain to wage war on the Muslims in Syria and go and kill more. I mean, the feeling was, there's going to be more killing. It's going to be killing on killing. And when you heard the speech by President Hollande related to the attack, when he said,
it was very fiery though, wasn't it?
Very fiery. He basically, he saying that, they brought their attack to our children and our women. I'm going to take their attack to their children and their homes and destroy their homes.
Well, and you just said that because if you look at after a Paris attack, what happened? They went and carpet bombed Syria. On the next day or the following day, they went and carpet bombed the Syria. So, what do you think will happen now? I mean,
it's happened.
That's my thought. That's what
that was initially, and it did happen. We hear of the attacks, obviously, in Europe. Following day, there was 125 civilians killed in province in Manbij
after the
Nice attack, and it was widely seen by the critics as a revenge attack on what's happened in Nice. So this is what's happening, and the other thing is really is constant malignment of Islam, and without actually even this questioning of foreign policy is impossible. You can't do that. It's not allowed. You be labeled as those who are sympathizers of the terrorist attacks.
This is worrying, isn't it?
This is worrying, and this is what's happened in relation to this, and this worries me because there'll be constant suspicion, and there is constant suspicion because when you speak to people, colleagues at work, these Muslims again, it's attacked by Muslims. Everyone wants to know Who was it? Was it a Muslim or not?
Do you feel like when you go in, you think, oh no, this attack has happened. Am I going to go in this? Do you prepare yourself like mentally? Look, I'm going to go and I've planned this. I know what I need to say.
Well, this is my advice to my family and my children and the wider Muslim community is you need to be careful. The number of attacks on Muslims have increased in society as a result of the way Islam and Muslims have been portrayed in the media.
I want to come. I will go into that later on. I want to talk about Islamophobia, but I just wanted to get your reactions. Maybe your colleagues, your family. We have women folks, our sisters, our wives. How do they feel?
Yeah, the discussion
do they feel
is always
wow, okay, now this week I'm not going to go out as much, or if I do, I'm going to go with my husband or my brother or my children. What do you think, Nazrul?
There is a concern that there will be blowback from such actions, and we have seen that there has been an increase in hate crime. There's a lot of statistics that the Met Police, particularly in London, has produced. Something like 6,000 cases have been reported to them in a space of a month, and that is an increase of more than half of these cases. So there is a concern, and the result of such attacks are from the demonization that you get. You can't separate the two. So the fact that you do get an attack that happens somewhere in the European mainland, the result of that is the fact that Muslims and Islam are demonized. Islam is made to look like a religion that is out there just to kill and conquer and take over everybody, and Muslims are then seen as the fifth column that is here within the non-Muslim societies or the non-Muslim communities that are there to propagate this. And unfortunately that is the case. Do people change their patterns? I'm sure they do. I think it was my wife was supposed to go out shopping for Eid with my children, and she was going to go lakeside. And Lakeside is out in Essex. We know that most of the people there are not Muslim. I actually said to her, look, it'd be best if you don't. Instead, wait until the weekend where I can go with you, or find somewhere local to go, like the Stratford Westfield Centre. These are the conversations that I had with my wife to make sure that she unfortunately becomes a victim of some ignorant person who blames Muslims and who blames Islam for all the ills that you see happening on the media.
Exactly. So now my point is, you've actually mentioned something which is quite pertinent. Yeah, if you look at the Muslims in France, can you imagine how what they're going through? I mean, can you give us some incidents? How are they responding to these attacks? Because there's a huge community in France.
I think it's important to understand that the response has to be right in this incident, especially from the leaders that are within the Muslim community. And I was really not. It wasn't very impressive after the Normandy attack that the French Muslim Council leader came out and said that we need to look at Islam and the viewpoint that Islam pushes, for which these people have become terrorists. And you have to contrast that to the response that the Pope gave. I mean, Subhan Allah, he's not even a Muslim, yeah. And
what was his response?
His response says, these attacks, these wars are not because of any religion. It's not religions are not causing these wars. And he referred it to wars of interest for money and for resource. And this exactly hits the point in the head, nails it. Yeah, the fact that how ISIS have been created, and this worldview gives the ability for the colonizers to use as a stick, or to put the Muslims within their area in line, so that the dawah of Islam isn't done and secularized, and also to use it as a way of colonizing other parts of the world.
Let me stop you there. I mean, you said something which is true. I mean, if you look at the priest, he made a very good point. And if you look at some of our imams, they are not out there. They can't make that kind of comments. Is it because that a non-Muslim can get away with saying this? He can say this is a foreign policy. It's because of the interest. Because a moment a Muslim, especially our community leaders or imams, if they say that, then they are deemed as...
That is very, very true. Because LBC yesterday, when I was after the Pope made that comment, he was being attacked. This guy, a religious guy, he should stay in his church. Yeah, he shouldn't comment on world politics. He doesn't know nothing about world politics. So you can see a non-Muslim who says these things being attacked. So when a Muslim, a friend of mine called up LBC and he talked about, maybe, there's issues of foreign policy that's related.
That's the word, isn't it?
And then straight away he was termed
sympathizer of.
He was, painted as a sympathizer of these terrorist attacks. He's sympathizing with these terrorists. So this is a discussion that the media would not like to have. They wants to brush it under the carpet. The only thing is, if you look at the response of how different attacks have been looked at. So the Munich attack that's happened, where initially it was thought that it was a Muslim guy that may be involved in the attack, and the discussion was, this is a terrorist attack. As soon as they realized, no, it's not a Muslim person, but it was a Christian guy who did the attack. Oh, it's a deranged far-right extremist. That's it, a loner. And that's what's happened. So the 19 people in Japan, first it was, maybe the Islamic State attacked Japan, and then when it was realized it was a loner, it became a loner. You see, he's not a Muslim, then he's a loner, and that's how they look at it. The media, the way they portray those attacks, that any Muslim, any kind of link to Islam, it becomes a terrorism and things like that. That's what I would say. What would you say?
Well, basically, I mean, you talked about France, and I want to maybe, Naz, maybe what you can give us is basically, France has been experiencing many terrorist attacks within this year. What do you think that is? And is there any particular reason why France is the main target? I mean, German attacks. Germany, there are some people that are linking Germany with refugees, but France and Germany, especially France. I mean, what do you think that is? Why? And ISIS is claiming, whoever does it, whatever, if it's just a loner or if it's just, they would like to claim these.
We've got to look at some facts in terms of the attacks that have happened, and we've got to look at them sort of individually. The Nice attacker actually didn't have any links with IS. No links between him and IS can actually be found. Then conveniently enough, the media started reporting how he got radicalized within 24 hours, and then suddenly he became an IS supporter or an IS follower, even though the French prosecutor has actually said that there is no link between the driver of the lorry and Islamic State, as opposed to the two attackers who attacked the priest. They conveniently, all of them seem to have flags of Islamic State found within the homes that then somehow links them with Islamic State. Your question about why France, I think it's what Khairo mentioned at the beginning. Francois Hollande's response was I remember watching his speech, he began his speech by saying we are at war, and by saying we are at war, he then declared 3 months of emergency rule. He then sent the French aircraft carrier, the Charles de Gaulle, to the Mediterranean. That evening, the Americans that were supposed to be flying their sorties, they gave all the coordinates to the French, and the French carried out 70-80 sorties on Syria and Iraq, attacking Islamic State positions. But we know whenever you do these types of attacks, there are always going to be victims who are innocent people, and when innocent people get killed and bombed under such circumstances, what is the net result of this? You end up radicalizing these people. So where they're trying to say the Nice driver got radicalized within 24 hours and they don't know how he got radicalized, but they're going to assume that he got radicalized, well, actually the radicalization process, and the biggest one that takes place, and the one that even the Chilcot inquiry actually pointed out, is your foreign policy and your meddling in the Middle East. It was said to Tony Blair that when you go into Iraq, you're actually going to have blowback or further consequences and repercussions, which are going to be acts of terror. Fast forward to 2016 from 2003, this is where we find ourselves in. But if me and you, I think your last point about if me and you mention this as Muslims, suddenly we're advocates of terrorists, or we're defending terrorism, or we're sticking. We're sympathizers for terrorists. But yet Chilcot said it in his inquiry that this isn't going to deal with Al-Qaeda. The invasion of Iraq isn't going to deal with Al-Qaeda or any acts of terror. Instead, you're going to ferment it and make it worse. And since Francois Hollande said the same thing or made the same decision that Tony Blair made back in 2003, where we're going to go go into the Middle East. Now you see the results of what is happening.
Okay,
there.
fantastic. Kharuba, you
Just
want
one more point I'd like to say
I
on
want to
this,
read some text. We've got a couple of texts through.
Just a couple of points in terms of the people. There's more than 6 million Muslims in France, and really, what's happening to the Muslims in France is the inability of secularism to integrate the Muslims. It's amazing. I mean, they are in ghettos. They can't get jobs.
What do you mean by integrate? What do they? How do you, I know it's a big subject, but what?
Well, they're not able to accommodate Muslims because what they would like to do, France would like to do, is totally remove Islam from them. And obviously the Muslims are not going to remove Islam. So there may be an ability of secularism to be able to accommodate Muslims, whereas Islam managed to accommodate different kind of different races.
Well, you're not really, I mean, you're not really going to
the point I want to
accommodate when you ban the niqab and the hijab.
That's right. So there is this feeling of real outcasts in France. So an example a journalist gave was you had 30 people in a college who were studying media studies, and everyone had to.
That's in France.
In France, everyone, and he was one of the colleagues of one of the students in that school during that course, and he was saying there's only one Muslim guy in that course. So what was required was to also get experience, 6 months experience in media by all of the students. And every single one of the people got a placement, but the Muslim guy didn't get a placement.
Why not?
Why? Because he had Muhammad in his name. And that's why he didn't get it. And the journalist is saying that this is the reason. This is where it is. But did they
explicitly say, "Look, this is because of your"?
The journalist said, "This is a BBC journalist, by the way, and he's reporting on BBC. He's saying, no, this is the situation. He was a friend of mine. There was no problem with him, but he couldn't get a place." Yeah, and he's saying this is the case all over France. Yeah? The Muslims they are just about barely surviving, and their conditions are quite bad.
Germany?
Even if you go to Paris, you see the ghettos. I was in Paris last year, and we saw some of the ghettos. It's just incredible.
What about Germany?
So when these kind of things happen, the problem is when these kind of things happen, then these people have added reasons, to not have any value for their life, if you like.
Sorry, Nazul, you want to come in?
Yeah, let's not forget also France's history. France was part and parcel of the Sykes-Picot Agreement that divided and carved up the Middle East. France was part and parcel of the Great Game that took when the French and the British were splitting up Africa. A lot of the problems that you have within Niger, the Central African Republic, Sierra Leone, Congo, all of these countries are French colonies or were ex-French colonies. They speak French as a language. And if you look at these countries and you look at the problems that are within these countries, you've got many, many sectarian problems that the French purposely left behind. When these people then come to your country, as the Algerian community has come and settled, and they now see themselves as having a right to settle in your country because you, for the last 2-3 centuries, colonized us and took the resources from our countries and then left your problems in our countries, you've created a problem for yourself. So France, in its history from the 16th and the 1700s, has been meddling in Muslim countries. And now you see the results of that.
Okay, let me take some text.
And if you look at ISIS,
that's all. Go on. You can make that point. Make it quick.
So just to reiterate what he is saying, which is is years of colonization and interference in the Muslim world, and groups like ISIS, they didn't
just come
appear in a vacuum. They appeared in certain situations. So if you look at most of the leaders within the ISIS are former Ba'athists from Saddam's regime, who see by invoking Islam some way they can go back to power. And they justify the bombings that are carried out the attacks in Europe as a justification for the bombings that the Allies are carrying out in those regions. So it's tit for tat, and let's not forget that.
Let me take a couple of these questions. I think it may be relevant. You guys can answer this, or if you feel that, look, it's just a comment, then it's a comment. So the first text says, can you please discuss where where a far-right attacked and killed 7 in a shopping center in Germany, out of which 5 or so were Muslims, and explained why the nature of coverage was different and why he wasn't a terrorist. He was described as deranged and obsessed with mass shooting. Are they sympathizing with their terrorists? That's the first one. Francis Holland can act in retaliation and kill innocent Syrians and make sense. How is it to the same people it doesn't make sense that Western foreign policy could ever lead to terrorism? That's the second text. I've got another one here. Let me quickly go through those so you can listen to the show. Good discussion, but seems like you're saying it's all the fault of Western governments. Even ISIS is somehow their fault. Sounds like a victim mindset. Surely you have to accept that there are jihadi groups who are out there who say violence against civilian is okay. I think that's a very interesting question. But you guys want to take that, or it's up to you?
Okay. Well, the second one first. If I just quickly say that. Agree. The thing is, what I'm saying is that let's not the blame continuously to say it's a Muslim. Yeah, there may be more than that. Let's look at the question the question that you're not allowed to ask. The foreign policy, the colonization, the blowbacks as a result of these kind of events. Well, we're not allowed to question this. This is not a discussion. Well, I think this should be part of the discussion. And the first question that is talking about, the attack in Munich, and that is very, very interesting, because initially it was thought as a terrorist attack, and then afterward, this whole thing about terrorism, if a Muslim does an attack, even if it's a small attack, even if it's one person dying or even not dying, this is seen as a terrorist attack, as where somebody who's from a different faith does a similar attack, or even worse, is seen as a deranged loner, or depressed
mental
loner,
health or something.
mental health problems, and because and when we talk about terrorism and when we talk about these attacks, we should not talk about it in isolation. We need to make sure that we, because in the same week, like I said, there's been an attack in Syria, in Manbij, where 125 people were killed. Are they not? These are innocent people. Isn't that a terrorist attack?
I think the last text is quite interesting. It says, "Look, do Muslim community, do we sound like we are victim? Have we developed this victim mentality?" Nazul, you want to come in?
You develop a victim mentality when you're busy condemning and apologizing something that happened somewhere else, and somehow we're apportioned the blame for it. That's when you become a victim, because you're busy apologizing as if it's your fault when you've done something wrong. What I said previously was how there's been a design and a game played out in Muslim countries, and how the Western and the European countries, primarily the British and the French, they had their designs over the Muslim countries. We know that the Ottoman Khilafah state, that was dismembered by who? The French and the British. This is historical fact. I can't say I'm a victim for stating a historical fact. North Africa was taken from Egypt to Morocco by the British and the French. Middle East was taken by the British and the French. Asia was taken primarily by the British.
Okay, so given this reality,
given this fact,
now the text is, look, there are jihadi groups.
So there are these jihadi groups come about as a result of what happened, as I've just mentioned. These jihadi groups didn't suddenly just come about. They didn't suddenly think, I need to go do something to the British state, or I need to do something to the French state. They are a consequence of their meddling in Muslim countries, which has gone on for centuries.
But they are saying that killing innocent people is okay, which is not right.
That argument I understand, which the jihadis make, and that argument I know is wrong, and we all agree that their argument is wrong. Unfortunately, given the circumstances that people find themselves in, where a bomb is dropped on your village, where you are killed, where your family is killed, your wife is killed, your children is killed, in that situation of desperation, you breed that mindset, where you breed somebody who is vulnerable to be picked up and somebody to be manipulated to believe what they are doing is jihad fi sabilillah, when we know it's not. There is nothing jihad about killing children. There is nothing jihad about making an 84-year-old priest get on his knees and then slitting his throat in front of parishioners and the nuns, and then trying to give a khutbah salah at the church pulpit. There is nothing about that is Islamic. But yet these people, if you look at the actual history of the two boys, and they were young teenagers who actually carried out this attack, and you follow their history about how they've been arrested, how they were treated, how they tried to go abroad, and how they were mistreated abroad as well. Then you see why is it that people become like this and how are they created. Most of these attackers are known, and they are known to the security services because they've got some sort of history and some sort of past. And unless you deal with these issues, you're not going to get to the actual issue of dealing with jihadists. And I do accept that amongst the Muslims there are some people who do want to cause harm, but if you discuss with them and you find
that's
out
with any society though, isn't it? You've got the KKK, you've got there are in America they're carrying guns and saying we'll hang them, we'll shoot them, and people have their grievances. And unless you look at these grievances and you think how you're going to address them, you're not going to resolve this problem. Okay, I want to just briefly look at the media, because I know you guys touched on the media, but I just wanted to maybe just discuss a little bit more on the media. How do you feel about the media coverage of these events? Because the suicide bombing at Istanbul airport in June, we saw 41 people dead and over 200 injured. And the news or the media coverage was quite low according to the standard that we see compared to the attacks in Europe. Do you guys see a double standard?
I think I'll have to be blind not to see a double standard. Everybody sees a double standard within the newspapers and the media that you have in general.
Is it the Muslims who see double standard or non-Muslims?
No, I think it's both parties. Because when I discuss with the non-Muslims and my colleagues and I mention this is what's been said in the media, this is what's been said in the media, this is what they're saying in the radio, they're aware of these things. The fact that the Sun produced this headline that says 1 in 5 Muslims support jihad or they sympathize with jihad, then that turned out to be a wrong fact, because it turned out that it's the way they question people from their poll of about 1,000 people. These things, it creates this demonization. The Sun newspaper sells millions of copies. It's the
but
largest
even just the Sun, we had the BBC, we had the Sky, we have Al Jazeera, and the coverage was quite low.
You know
really,
what? I mean,
really.
The thing is, any thinking Muslim or non-Muslim can see that the double standards in the media, especially in terms of the deaths and the value of life. Like I was talking about, you mentioned Istanbul. The value, the people in Istanbul, their value, they've been also a terrorist attack. People have died. Isn't the value of life here as important as people in Nice or the priest in Normandy or in Germany?
What do you think that is? Why do you think there is a double standard? Is it because? Well, some could easily say it's Muslim lives. They're used to it. It's a conflict zone. You can't. Whereas if you look at Western countries, this is not the norm, and that's why it's reported.
This is the thing. I mean, the whole. Remember, the colonization is happening in the Muslim world, and the killing. If it wasn't double standard, then it was not possible. It wouldn't be possible for France, Britain, America to go and do what they want to do in places like Iraq or Afghanistan or even in North Africa, where it requires them killing millions. In fact,
to create public opinion, do you think?
If the value of life meant the same, then they couldn't do that, because the public opinion would not allow innocent people to die. So they have to make it as though they can't be innocent people in the rest of the world. The only innocent people, the only real people are here, if you like. Yeah?
But I mean, otherwise, I don't think society accepts that. Maybe.
If you look at the drone attacks that's happening in Pakistan, they just thought of as numbers. When Israel killed last Ramadan 2,500 of which about more than 500 were children. It's just numbers. There's no media outcry of that. Are they not innocent people? I think the only thing is the reason why the media, because the media at the end of the day, is a hand of the state, no matter what. There's no really independent media. And the way you control it is through different policies and different rules and regulations that is there. to do that. So the media, what we find is they will value certain lives and will not value other lives. So this is the game. This is part of the state control.
So do you think the media is state controlled? No, I mean you can't. What do you think? Do you think the media is state controlled? You can't.
No, what it does is
throw that kind of.
What it does is it plays a certain agenda. So the government has a certain agenda, and the media plays that same agenda. Yeah, pushes for the same agenda. So what you found, let's say the Chilcot inquiry.
But that's exactly the problem.
You need to look at the Chilcot inquiry.
This is what the text was saying. We have this victim mentality. Why can't we go to the media? Maybe we have some problems in our community. What do you think? Yeah?
No, I'm saying the media is always biased in a certain point. And I think what we need to do is, obviously, we have to do our best to come through that and realize that, because that will be the case. This is how any state is organized. And we have to come through that. So we shouldn't be shy of, even if we're called terrorist sympathizers, to actually, say the haqq, say the truth. In front of this onslaught that's out there. Like I said, most of the people that are thinking will realize the double standards. Those people, the Sun readers and the Mirror readers, all they take is the headlines. They won't read beyond the headlines, because if you read beyond the headlines, you can see the double standards, if you like. The problem is that most people will not read beyond the headlines, and those Muslims again, they did it again. You see?
I think where I would say, if you look at recently, one of the Sun columnists, I can't remember his name, and he said the Nice attack was reported by Channel 4's Muslim journalist. She was wearing a hijab. I can't remember her name, but anyway, Fatima Manje, is it? Something like that.
Yes, I think that's right.
Yeah, that's her name. Yeah, and you can see that. Look, they can say these things and they can get away with it. And this is the problem. I think this is why there is a distrust within the Muslim community. I personally don't believe that all media is bad. You see, I can see there's some goodness in there. There's some, good coverage. But these are the things that actually, because media outlets, they do not challenge these. You see, that kind of comments or headlines, they should challenge it and say, look, this is wrong. Anyway, shall we move on? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. I think you guys don't want to talk about the media, do you? Okay. So what should be the correct response from Muslims and from the Islamic text? I think that's what I want to discuss. What is the correct response? Because you talked about many responses and many ways that people respond. What is the correct response? Yeah, let's go for it.
The correct response should be one of where we're not scared. We're not apologizing. We're not condemning continuously. And if I draw parallels, for example, we know that there's this investigation going on looking at historical cases of sex crime, rape, that type of stuff, and paedophilia. You do know, and the people that have been caught up in this generally are white and the elderly. Your Max Clifford, your Rolf Harris, these types of people. You do not see every white man in England who is above 65 coming out and apologizing and condemning such behavior. Just to say this was not in my name. So likewise, me or you and anybody else as a Muslim should not feel like we need to come out to apologize that what happened in Nice, what happened in Munich, what happened in Orlando, what happened in Belgium, what happened in... The list is endless. That we feel every time we need to come out and we need to apologize and we need to condemn and say that this was not in our name. That's the first point. We can't shy away. We shouldn't seem as if we're being blamed. This victim mentality that was mentioned in one of your previous messages, the fact that Muslim leaders feel like they got to do that, to me, that shows victim mentality. That you're not willing to actually stand up and say, actually, that's
because
got nothing to do with me, but I don't feel like I want to condemn.
Feel that you're guilty, isn't it?
Precisely.
You've accepted that guilt.
There is a guilt by association.
Yeah.
And what is that association? The fact that you're Muslim and you believe in Islam. Clearly, that can't be the case. So how do we need to respond? We need to look at what happened during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as well as the Sahabas. We know that during the first 3 years that when they came out and they started publicly taking Islam to the Meccan society.
First 3 years of Islam, meaning
first
the
3
revelation.
Years of the revelation. That after they came out of the house of Darul Arqam and they proclaimed Islam openly, that there was the first strategy that was used against them by the Quraysh was that of propaganda and slander and lying and misinformation. exactly the same.
That was the Qurayshi media, yeah?
That was the Qurayshi media. Exactly, we live in the same parallels now, where slander, lying, misinformation, this is continuously pumped out. But what did Rasulullah and the Sahabas do? They stood strong. They carried on with their message. They used the ayats of the Quran. They used the situations that they found themselves in to actually discuss with people and not shy away. Unfortunately, where we become victims, that is when we do shy away, and that is when we do take a step back, and that is when we do an injustice to Islam and being Muslims, where we're not standing up for our deen, and we're not carrying the dawah to the non-Muslims, and we're not giving confidence to the Muslims to actually stand up and profess their deen.
Very interesting point. Brother Khairul?
Yeah, I think Brother Nazrul gave quite eloquent issues related to. What I would add is we know the truth. The Muslims within the Muslim community, that it's nothing to do with Islam, and we know the sayings of Prophet ﷺ about attacking innocents or places of worship and so on. Yeah, this is not allowed in Islam. And if you look at a couple of points, I'd like to say the niece. The person that attacked Nice in Nice, he was a womanizer. He had relationships with outside marriage. He used to drink. He used to take drugs and he used to drink and so on. And he used to even have what's it called pork as well. This is reported by his neighbors. So we need to point those kind of things out and say, look, is it secularism that caused this kind of thing? But then
they will say, look, he's a reformist Muslim. It's just
he got radicalized in 24 hours.
24 hours,
which is the
and
line
he's looking to go to heaven straight away.
Yeah, that's right.
He's a martyr. Look, people can justify it the same way a media justifies or. There are Muslim organizations, jihadi groups that will justify this.
Right. So the thing is that there's a huge pressure to accept the narrative that's in the media, and this is where our response comes in. As no matter how strong the media and the onslaught is, we shouldn't accept that. You see, one of the part of Islam is to say the haqq in front of the ruler, and if you're killed, you're martyred. And we need to remind ourselves of those kind of things, and we need to remind ourselves how the Rasulullah and the Sahabis were attacked in Medina. Constant vilification. If you look at Bilal radiallahu anhu or any of the others, and we need to get inspiration from that and say, no, it doesn't matter. The haqq has to be said, and haqq has to come out, and we need to. It's very, because of all of these pressures, it's very easy for us to say, Islam is a problem, and we need to maybe change Islam. Maybe we need to accept some of the things that they're saying.
You just talked about change Islam. There are scholars that Muslim scholars that are saying that Islam needs to be reformed. It needs to be modernized. It needs to work with the 20th century, 21st century. And we need to look at how to reform. What's your thoughts on that? Nazrul,
there's been a general argument and a thought trail where Islam needs to be reformed. This isn't just something that's linked to these recent acts of terror. The fact that you want to reform Islam, I think, is something that Khairul mentioned earlier on as well. The idea that you want to secularize Islam so it fits in with the West. Within the Western secular liberal lifestyle that
when you say secularize, can we just be specific?
To make it specifically it specifically about your 5 pillars. So your kalima, your shahada, your salah, your siyam, going on hajj, and then having your zakat that you give. If you secularize Islam, it means you make it just a religious and a spiritual religion, simply like Christianity. So the same way Christianity has been secularized over the past couple of 100 years, where David Cameron, one of the things that he was applauded on was making giving homosexual marriage the same as civil partnership marriages. The people that are against homosexual marriages was actually the church. But the church's position now, the Church of England that is, their position now is if people want to be homosexual and they want to be married, let them get married. So if Islam is to follow the same footsteps of Christianity, it means we too have to be secularized, where we accept the liberal values within this society, things like promiscuity, zina outside of marriage, homosexuality, alcohol, gambling, the basic tenets that you teach your children and I teach my children of not to do. Don't gamble, stay away from pork, stay away from alcohol, get married before you have relations. These basic tenets are the opposite to the liberal society, because people are supposed to be free. And if you want to liberalize and secularize Islam, it means Islam will become the same way Christianity is today, where basically everything is halal.
So I mean, what you're saying is basically Islam shouldn't have a say in society, in politics. Yeah, that's what you mean.
Yeah.
So basically, it's just Hinduism, whatever religious, some religious things that you do, ceremonial kind of things.
Islam becomes the same as every other religion. It's just full of rituals. But
and I think do you think that's the problem that the Western government or policymakers have?
Yes, because Islam, if you look at our history, we didn't just have a spiritual belief. Spiritual belief is the basis of our deen. But if you look at the seerah again, as I mentioned before, what did Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam do?
Seerah, the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
The 10 years that the 13 years, that he spent in Mecca, this is where he was professing the Islamic creed, and this is where he was trying to get the people of Mecca to believe in Islam. But after 13 years, he came to a realization that the people of Mecca are not going to believe, which is why he had to make plans and preparations to make hijrah. When he made hijrah, where did he end up? He ended up in Yathrib, which became known as Medina, which is where he is buried till today. In Medina, he established himself politically, and by establishing himself politically, then we know there's a change in the revelations. That this one in the Quran we have Makki and Medinan surah. The Medinan surahs are the ones that are legislative. They're the ones to do with rules. They're the ones to tell people how to behave, how to interact, how to buy and sell, contracts, trading. All of these things are what was revealed in Medina. So Islam. So
the Medina was a functional state, isn't it?
That's right.
So, I mean, you talk about when they say the so-called Islamic State, that statement actually means that there was Islamic State and there was a Islamic ruling, and these ISIS that are coming, they are not the real Islamic State. So the non-Muslims or the media, they actually acknowledge that there is a Islamic State from that statement.
Islam inevitably has a spiritual and a political creed too, and that we see from the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Brother Khairul, you want to come in? Sorry, I wanted to let Nazrul finish.
Yeah, I think we need to be careful and not be silenced in terms of Islam, because remember, the situation of the world is very, very bad, and I'm not talking about the situation of the Muslims is terrible. I mean, you can't get any worse. It's like
when you mean by situation, is it because we're not practicing? What do you mean by situation?
Well, let me finish my point and then I'll try and answer that question. But the situation of non-Muslims, the non-Muslim world isn't so good either, and that's the thing. And Islam gives us solutions for all of these problems. We know how abysmal the situation of the Muslims are, because constant infights within the Muslims, the division within the Muslims into
they're fighting each other.
50 so many nations, the killing in Syria, or the colonization by the colonizers. These things are happening, and we're not able to solve any of the problems. In terms of if you look at the last 100 years, there's no innovation, no nothing. You're not producing anything within the Muslim world.
We have Dubai.
You have Dubai, yeah. I must say, fine. Dubai,
so not want to come in, but
which is built on slavery from people of the South Asia. So how is that progress? There hasn't been any progress. But it's not only that. If you look at the Western world, if you look at the markets in terms of 2008 and huge breakdown within the banking system, and the cry out from the people in terms of they're in some kind of these mortgages that they feel they're trapped in because they want to have a property. In terms of family life, the children not giving any kind of respect to their parents, the wife or the husband.
But hold on. There are issues with any society. You can't just say because of this.
There's so much problems in the world, and Islam has solutions for this.
I agree. And I agree.
And what will happen if we are silent? Then we do not say anything in relation to that, because what you become is liberal and say, oh, everything's fine. Yeah, and this is where Islam really does not stay silent. It says, look, there are solutions for your problems. There are solutions for our problems, and these are the solutions. Islam can provide the solutions, and the way to do that is to not be silent, not to play the narrative that is played in the media, but to speak out, speak the haq.
Sorry, Nazul, you wanted to come in. I know.
He's mentioning that there's all of these problems out there. There's far too many problems to be dealing with them one by one. Ultimately,
that's my issue, because you can't just say Muslims have issues. And
that's right.
The Muslim world is the same.
Ultimately, to be able to deal with the problems that you have within the Muslim community or the Muslim Ummah or even amongst the non-Muslims, you need a political entity that is going to deal with these problems. When Rasulullah came in Makkah, when he was in Makkah, 40 years of his life, he saw all the problems. And it wasn't only until Islam was revealed to him at the age of 40 did he spend the next 10 years trying to deal with them. But he realized within those 10 years, actually, I can't do anything. He then spent the next 3 years trying to establish himself politically so that he can deal with the problems that he spent the last 40 years of his life actually witnessing. And it wasn't until he made Hijrah, went to Medina, and then Fatah Makkah happens when he returns back to Mecca 7-8 years later, does he actually deal with the problems that he saw that was taking place.
I want to quickly come back, because you talk about Rasulullah in Medina and he established the Islamic State, the actual Islamic State, where we know that it ruled for 1400 years after Rasulullah. But my point is, look, the Islamic ruling or Islamic State was never an angelic state. And that's the point, that it will have problems. So that's why if you look at the secular model, they can say, yeah, we are having problems. We are learning. We're developing. So our banking system is actually developing. So maybe in 50 years' time, that's their argument, yeah, that in a capitalist argument, that look, in 50 years' time, that it will improve, yeah. How would you argue that?
I don't want to divert the discussion to maybe capitalism and Islam, but what I would like to say is these concepts that, because we're talking about the response from the Muslims or how the Muslims should react to these kind of incidents. I think one of the things that hasn't happened is the discussion of these are real concepts within Islam, things like khilafah, things like ummah, things like jihad, and all of those. You
can't mention the word jihad these days.
All of those things are hijacked by groups like ISIS and so on.
Yeah.
And I think it's high time that the mosques and people like that discuss these things and bring out the correct concepts that are within Islam.
But can they discuss? Because we've discussed maybe earlier on that, look, the moment they say these words, then they're labeled. So can they really discuss these?
Well, this is where Islam says, in terms of haqq, in terms of truth, it's better to stay with the haqq and truth. And it doesn't matter what falls on us. And if we're not, if we as leaders within the Muslim community are not talking about this, then obviously the youth, they're going to go somewhere else for these solutions. And where are they going to go to? They're going to go to people like ISIS and
or the internet.
Or the internet, who are going to provide these kind of solutions. So we need to accept these are concepts, because you cannot deny the concept of khilafah is within Islam. You cannot deny the concept of ummah is within Islam, the concept of unity, and that Islam does not agree with nation states. These are facts that cannot be denied, and the solutions that come from it. So you might as well discuss it. Yeah, you might as well tell them the truth. And not be worried about it.
Let them find out from you, then Mr. Google.
That's exactly right.
Okay, now the thing is, you talked about Muslims or in the community, how should Muslims react? What about what would you advise to those Muslims who are interacting with non-Muslims? I mean, how do they interact? I mean, what kind of stuff do you think they should be discussing?
Well, we need to look at Rasulullah and the best period that fits us is the Medinan period. So Makkah period. So a couple of things. One is the dawah to Islam, the fact that are men able to design laws and rules that creates harmony and tranquility in society? And we know the problems, and that's where I was trying to mention earlier, alluding to when I was talking about the problems in the world, whether it's Muslim world or non-Muslim world, because right now there is no Islam. ISIS hasn't presented an Islamic state. The Islam is missing. As a result of that, the problems are compounded, and we are not able to solve these problems. We're talking about in 50 years there's going to be a solution. No, I don't think so, because because the whole thing about the banking system is one of exploitation, and we can see the increase of between the poor.
The gap,
the gap is increasing.
Yeah.
And that is look at the last 50 years. It's been increasing.
Okay,
there was a halt because of communism, but it's been increasing after that. So this is happening. So the only people that can provide the solution are the Muslims. And the way we can do it, the way it
not
happens.
Muslims, but from Islamic texts, meaning the Islam has these apparatus where it can actually solve these problems.
That's exactly
what
right.
You're saying,
That's exactly right. But that has to be implemented in a societal, in a society, in a state, in a state form. Without that, it can't happen. And we can not talk about those kind of things, and these kind of problems will carry on forever until the Muslims sort themselves out, if you like.
Interesting. Sorry, Brother Nazar.
See, you're asking how should we sort of Muslims move forward or work with the non-Muslims that are around us. And the Sahabas, we know they were the best generation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls them the best generation in the Quran. So here they were in a situation, an awkward situation if you like, as we find ourselves in, professing to believe in a man who is spoken to from the heavens. At the same time, they believe in one God who was the sole ilah, not the many ilah that they had in Makkah at the time. And this sole ilah was Al-Khaliq of the Alameen. So the sole ilah was the one that was responsible for everything. Their belief, the creed that the Sahabas had was completely contrary to the creed of the people in Makkah at the time. Yet what did they do? That's an awkward situation, isn't it? Same way I here as a Muslim, I believe in Islam. I do not believe in the liberalism and the secularism that people believe here in the West or within the UK. So there is this awkwardness between me and them. But what did they do? They did not cower. They did not compromise. Instead, they actually took the message and they gave dawah. And that is what we should be doing.
So
as
Muslims, they interacted with the society.
Yes, we interact and we engage. You do not isolate. Isolation leads to more fear-mongering, more scaremongering, more Islamophobia, and all of those other problems.
That's a very important point.
Interact, engage, do da'wah to the non-Muslims, and profess your deen, but as Allah says in the Quran, with wisdom and beautiful preaching.
Okay, last point. Maybe you guys can, give our listeners some confidence. How do we move on, and what is the future of Muslims living in the West? Brother Khairul, how do we move on? What is the future of the Muslims in the West?
I think the future is bright. The future...
We've heard that before. You're not selling something, are you?
Look, at the end of the day, the way the Muslims look at any kind of situation is a test on us. The whole thing, wherever we are, whatever situation that Allah has put us in, Allah has put us in a situation because Allah is testing us. And we need to see it that way. And when we apply Islam in this kind of situation, and when we look at how, and when we apply our responses according to Islam, then really that should bring us happiness, because we should see this as Allah being happy with us, because at the end of the day, dunya and the life, the temporary life that we have has no meaning for us, really. It's just temporary, and what we can gain in terms of the pleasure of Allah Ta'ala is everything for us.
So can I assume that we have a great opportunity here? This
is a very great opportunity. This is like the opportunity of the Sahabis. No other people within the past 1400 history had this duty, opportunity to do what Rasulullah ﷺ did, which is to resume the Islamic way of life, to bring in the world stage a state which implements Islam and solves the solution, gives solutions to mankind for all of their problems. We have that ability to engage in that, to become part of that struggle, to bring back Islam as a way of life.
See, the reason I'm now a couple of times I've mentioned Sirah and I've mentioned Makkah particularly is because that is the time and the period that we find ourselves in. We need to draw parallels between what the Sahabas did at that time under the leadership of Rasulullah, and then what we can do by learning about his life and the life of the Sahabas and emulating what they did, which is to work to actually change the environment and the society and the community that we find ourselves in by taking the message of Islam to everybody. Very famous hadith comes to mind where there will come a time when holding on to Islam will be like holding on to hot coal. That is exactly the situation that we find ourselves in. Do we stand by Islam and hold on to our deen, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, hold on to the rope of Allah, Or do we actually find ourselves crumbling and giving into the secular lifestyle that we see and the liberal values that we see, and we start changing Islam the same way Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism and every other religion that is out there, they have conformed to?
Alhamdulillah. I was going to say final thoughts, but I think you've given your final thoughts. So inshallah, look, we've come to an end. I think we've gone over a little bit. But, Jazakallah khair, brothers. Testing time for Muslims living in the West under this hostile situation. I think at this present moment, with all of these terror attacks and the rise of Islamophobia, we need to unite and have a clear message from the Muslim community. That's what I got from you. We definitely can't bury our heads in the sand. Yeah, and I hope things will go and just pretend things will go away. It's not going to happen. Yeah, really, it's not going to happen. So I believe we should not shy away from discussing these issues with the wider society, especially the non-Muslims who are bombarded with nonsense from the right-wing media. So I think this is what I got from your discussion. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair.
These discussions we have, these kind of discussions we have at Straight Talk will be available on Middle Path Radio YouTube channel, which you can go in and listen to, inshallah, and also our website, which is straight-talk.co.uk. I always get this wrong. Yeah. So please share amongst your family and friends and spread the word. I would like to thank the brothers for coming down and discussing this topic, inshallah. So please, I want you guys to come down again. Yeah. And a special thanks to all our listeners for listening and contributing to this show. I know we had a long break, but please, we will continue every Thursday 9 p.m. So please, join us, inshallah. I really appreciate your comments and questions. So please, next week, make sure you don't miss this show. You can follow us on Twitter, which is at Middle Path Radio, and continue with the discussion. Again, many thanks for listening to this show, and I hope you have a nice evening, and till next time, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.